woke army is deciding to conquer new lands, and unfortunately, the great game of Dungeons & Dragons is a victim. Instead of having character races, we now have species, and certain character traits are no longer tied to that identity. The Dungeons & Dragons publisher supports a trend, lets people stop the game if they feel uncomfortable or unsafe. A high elf isn't automatically smart, and a mountain elf isn't automatically muscular. Dungeons & Dragons master Ryan Lessard told the New York Times why he thought D&D made these changes. What they're trying to do here is put up a signal flare not only to current players but potential future players that this game is safe and inclusive and thoughtful and sensitive approach to fantasy storytelling. Dungeons & Dragons made these changes back in the fall.
Many fans of the game are not happy with the changes. How much is Hasbro? Elon Musk wrote back in November. Hasbro, of course, being the Dungeons & Dragons toy maker. Internet personality Mario Nawfal broke down how he thinks Dungeons & Dragons publisher went woke. It started with banning classic Magic the Gathering cards like Jihad and Crusade for offensive depictions. They also scrubbed lore across Dungeons & Dragons to eliminate so-called problematic content like evil races. Fast forward to today, and Wizards of the Coast is firmly planted in woke territory. But at what cost? Can Elon make D&D great again?
Podcaster Ian Mayals Chong also jumped in, writing, Dungeons & Dragons is being destroyed by a bunch of woke pigs who are using the license as a platform to spread the woke mind virus and trash its original creators. Okay, so there's a lot of high drama in these comments, and I'm sure on occasion your eyes roll and mine do as well when people say that wokeness is destroying this, that, or the other thing.
Well, anytime someone uses the phrase woke mind virus, yes. By default, I end up on the woke side.
But as regular viewers of Rising know, I am an ardent player of Dungeons & Dragons. I have been described by Spectator magazine as DC's in-demand dungeon master. I have several groups that have been going on for years, so I play a lot of this game. So they've released a new instruction manual guide, which you are free to use or not use. The thing about D&D is it's a creative, you don't have to literally follow, they provide a framework and you can play their stories, their rules, their characters, or you can use that as a jumping off point to make your own, which is mostly what I do. My adventures take place in my own, in the Robbyverse. Excellent. That said, these new materials are in fact getting a little PC and sanitized in a way that does actually bother me, and even bothers people who roll their eyes even more at this kind of thing. We're like, oh yeah, there is something to this criticism. Let's take the orcs, for instance. Do you know what orcs are? Have you seen Lord of the Rings or something?
Along the broad swathe of topics that we discuss, I always try to know a reasonable amount, and I know nothing about Dungeons & Dragons beyond its name. Yeah, so explain to me the orcs.
Orcs from the Lord of the Rings. Orcs are kind of, foot soldiers of evil Dark Lord type people. They're ugly, they're brutish, they're warlike, and they're cannon fodder for the good guys. But you can also play as, at some point they said, well, if you want to play the bad guys, that'd be fun. And so they have characteristics associated with that group. So when you're picking your own character, you could be an elf, you could be a dwarf, you could be a gnome, you can be an orc. And then the game used to tell you, orcs are warlike and brutish and worship their Dark Lord and are enslaved to the mind of Grumsh, the one-eyed god, and that kind of thing. But they decided that was offensive, and now in the new guide, it's like, well, orcs like to wander. They like to travel. Do you know what I mean? It's just stripping it of some of its flavor. And again, you could take the old, for instance, in my campaign setting, I had a hotel that is staffed by reformed orcs, because that's funny, and that is an opportunity for comedy and comedic portrayals. But it's still the fact that the race is warlike is what supplies the comedy for then having orcs that don't play into that stereotype.
But is it true? So I was doing my due diligence on D&D, and I was reading up about this. Now, is it true that orcs have been sort of memified sometimes in racially dubious ways?
I mean, I don't think D&D has done this. I mean, certainly in people have made criticisms of Tolkien, of the Lord of the Rings, for how the orcs are saying, or the orcs supposed to be a stand-in for some kind of minority group, or for Jewish people, or for black people, whatever. Tolkien always said, no, absolutely not, and he did himself grapple with this kind, what it would mean to after the fall of the Dark Lord. What happens to them? Do they disintegrate into dust? Do they get reformed? Are they still around? And he actually did show them with personalities in the Lord of the Rings books. There are factions of orcs that are there are Sauron's orcs and there are Saruman's orcs, and they don't have the same agenda. So they've always been a little bit more complicated than that. But here, there's no attempt to associate them with any race or anything like that. But the whole part of the game is having characteristics that are characteristic of a group. Because you have your racial group, and then you have a class. Are you a ranger? Are you a bard? Are you a paladin? Those kinds of things. So you take those sets of factors together to make your character. So it just is part of the game that, well, the dwarves are shorter than the elves, and they don't live as long, but they have advantages in other ways. So if you're getting rid of, if you're sort of like deleting the whole concept of the game, if you're just saying, well, we can't assign any characteristics to a group because that would be offensive.
Yeah. No, I do.
That starts to defy human reality. Like, most of the professional basketball players are black because they're taller or better at the sport on average. Like, it's not. It's just true. I mean, it's just true. What do you say?
I mean, I don't know. Is it true that? I mean, I thought you were going to say most of the professional basketball players are above 6 feet tall or whatever, which is like that seems legitimate. But we're saying that black people are intrinsically better at basketball
at the elite level of play. Wouldn't you make that observation?
I mean, that gets into kind of complicated areas. Is that because it is a more commonly played game in the black community?
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know. It seems questionable to me to get into the whole thing of like just ascribing better superiority in
it's not like
groups.
Like superiority of we're all equal as human beings, and there are. There's a sociobiological component to various, there are advantages and disadvantages, and I don't know.
Yeah, separate from the whole, which is that's a kind of whole vexing question. This issue where they have made it that people playing D&D can state that they're uncomfortable or something, and that you should take that under.
Yeah, it just seemed like a try to get trigger warnings or safe spaces or something.
Do you think it detracts from the game though?
Well, if people are not having fun, you should stop or avoid. You should avoid situations where people are going to be uncomfortable. You have to know who you're playing with or something like that. So I guess I wasn't so bothered by that, but I was bothered by the sanitized language in some of these descriptions. We're going to get to the point where everything has to be animals, because animals are not offensive, and like animals have different characteristics and traits, and we've decided that this is something people in the gaming community talk about, how the theme for every game in the future will just be animals, because sports teams, it's just going to be animals, because we can't associate with any group or make any kind of associations that offends everyone. Will just be the penguins.
Well,
or
in a different
or
context,
the frogs.
Isn't that one of the strengths, I guess, of something like Sesame Street for kids, which is that the Sesame Street characters generally.
Speaking of woke propaganda,
are not making our children safe for another generation, but the Sesame Street characters are not generally identifiable with a particular race.
Are they not? Yeah, no. They're animals, and some of them aren't animals, but they're purple and blue.
Exactly.
Although Sesame Street certainly grappled with racism and homelessness and things like that. Progressive themes in a successful way for young people. I was never the biggest Sesame Street fan. I like the Muppets though. Related. Love Miss Piggy. Love her anger. Love her drama, the high drama.
When I was a young kid, I had a little Kermit puppet, but it was a very cheap knockoff, so he didn't actually resemble Kermit that closely.
Did they have to give him some different name in order
Probably.
to
I'm sure they did, to avoid copyright infringement.
All right, well, I don't know if I've sold you on playing Dungeons & Dragons.
Maybe I will check it out now that it is safe it's a safe space. Maybe I'll check it out.
Yes. Well, you're welcome to join my table anytime. That does it for us today, not only today on Rising, but for the entire year of 2024. We bid farewell to this interesting political year.
Certainly.
Interesting year. I will say that much, but we will be back next year or on Thursday. And in the meantime, you can like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. See you later.